So picking up where we left off, we were kind of talking about how the human being, the human organism that we identify ourselves with, this body, this personality, these thought processes that go, the experiences that we have, the memories that we hold, these all experientially are what make a human being not only intrinsically unique, intrinsically unreplicatable, but also intrinsically complex. And the level of complexity is only furthered in the direction of nihilistic thinking when we begin to realize and stem that we live in a world that's continuously and consistently numbing itself to the harshness of reality. What modernity has done is basically push us in a direction, and I'm not perfect. Look at the level of comfort clothing that I wear. I am a pajama warrior. It's only because I spend a majority of my time doing heavy lifting and being outside anyway, so I like a little bit of comfort here and there. I walk a balance. Modernity has pushed us away from adaptation, at least adaptation on a physical level. Modernity is trying to push adaptation at a very accelerated rate because there are basically foots on the gas pedal to juice the most out of human productivity possible, and we can't get into why, but you could probably form some ideas and opinions. That there's an attempt to make the mind more adaptable, more plastic, more malleable, essentially happening, and the reality is it's kind of a false value that's being attributed to attempting to basically speed and accelerate the processes and the paces through which people's mental faculties are put, because human beings are not like a speedometer on a vehicle. When we are accelerated beyond like a level of what individual people can process and comprehend, just at a flat rate of given circumstances that everybody is forced to live and adapt through, what happens is not a break in adaptation, but a break in the human being itself. That process through which modernity has kind of put us on the fast track to being what essentially equates to servants, with the rate of progress being pushed in the direction of developing more of the civilization over the actual development of the human beings themselves, is just a process of breaking and tearing down what evolution has created, and basically utilizing human beings as these mix-matched Frankenstein automatons that are used to just keep civilization upright while we build a house of cards on top of civilization. And yes, that is, if it isn't obvious, a very nihilistic point of view and perspective, but that is the point of view and perspective of what civilization has produced. Key to understand, and one thing to look at and reflect, is a human being is an organism that comes from nature, that evolves alongside nature, that adapts with nature. Modernity itself came out of nature. Technology itself developed and stemmed from the taking of elements and combining them, and basically utilizing the mind and a lot of complex structures made in thought processes that were then applied to these different elements to shape and mold, no different than smithing or the kind of metallurgy that existed during the different ancient civilizational times to meld and create something new. Human beings are, in a sense, fabricators, or as I like to see them, they're toy makers, they're tinkerers, they're artificers, they are alchemists. We are like sorcerers. whatever we can create and concoct within the realm of our imagination, we can, in some sense, make a microcosmic version of that in this reality. The problem stems when people get together and try to build and create machinations of extreme proportions, extreme ideas, without really considering and stopping and pondering the outcome of such things. That is kind of the folly of human beings and why we constantly go through time periods of rise and fall. Human beings do not understand that there is a process that exists within all of us where we are weighing and measuring our journey. And there is a flow, an organic flow that happens when you are more attuned to your actual natural human element and environment. That is an interaction with the world itself. It's outward and inward. There are times where we are actively putting and placing an outward external force on reality itself. And there are times where we go inward and introspect and reflect, where we ponder memories and experiences we've been through, where we see the lessons that life has intrinsically given to us, and we gain and garner from them a understanding and a reason and a rekindling and a bursting forth into new layers of adaptation and development for ourselves that open new pathways, that unlock new channels of discovery. And that very much sounds almost video game-esque, does it not? Well, the intrinsic nature of a human being is that it is looping in and out. No different than the infinity sign, but put it as something that comes out of you and then loops back in and through and up and out of you again. This is a kind of balancing act that humans walk. However, there are people that get stuck so much introspectively or caught in the wake, in the act of external stimuli and pushing an external force onto reality itself, that it becomes just a singular loop, not a feedback, not an infinite cycle of back and forth, exchange and unification of two different polarities, but a single polarity that inevitably just burns itself into nothing and then forces the other polarity to become more dominant. That's like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. Civilization is built on externalization of the internal, the imposing of will on the external world. Introspection and deep-seated, deep-rooted thinkers, philosophers, even the spiritual teachers that become like the priests or the gurus. This is from basically being the inverse of that, the inner architect, the inner kind of archiving scribe of the different experiences that exist in the inverse. It's important to realize and understand that reality is a balancing of the two. There are two different cycles that are transpiring in each and every human individual, and if we cut off one, we essentially set ourselves up both on an individual and a macrocosmic level, a communal level, if you want to call it that, for a fall. Because every human being is its own independent, walking, communicating, thinking, feeling, interaction with not only this world, but an internal world as well of experiences. That level of intelligence is nothing to gawk at, yet in modern civilization, we treat people as though they are nothing and nobody, because modern civilization and modernity is all about status, which the indicator that modernity is outwardly kind of nihilistic is when you have a world that's built entirely on materialism and you live on a world where all resources are basically finite and, inevitably those resources cannot be replenished, what do you get from that experience? You get a world of first come, first serve. You get a world of entitlement. You get a world that produces nothing more than a species that sees itself intrinsically as a race. And in a sense, that is what modernity is built out of. It's accelerating the brain forward, but never looking back. It is trying to ignore the intrinsic nature of what makes a human being a human being. It's trying to ignore the internal. It's a running out and away from the balance of being human. It's trying to compact a human being into just a complex structure of thoughts. And what happens when the thoughts reach the goalpost of the labyrinth or the end game? Well, they find that it was just a maze. It was just a labyrinth, and the thoughts themselves were the construct of the labyrinth and the very focal points going through the labyrinth. But it was all just the labyrinth. It was all just the story. So what human beings have done with modernity is essentially project a world of their intentions onto the physical environment. And we see just what humanity's intentions are for doing such a thing. Maybe they were put and placed in a kind of good faith towards developing civilization, but we see how easily they were overtaken by ill intentions. This is something to kind of be witness to understand and not take for granted. It's not that the world is wholly and solely doomed because materialism just ends up being a nihilistic game. It's just we put all our cards in one place and built a tower to the sky, not recognizing and realizing that every Wednesday there's a wind that blows through and knocks everything down. Every given give or take cycle of years, there is a change, a dramatic shift in human beings from putting themselves through the paces so much to where our values change. The things that we value change. We're human. We're not automatons. We're not built to be predatory and hostile towards one another. We are an interaction with the world. We are a independent, freely thinking, freely feeling experience walking the planet for a given period of time, and so is everyone and everything around you. That is nothing to gawk at. That's nothing to really intrinsically be able to joke about, but it's not also something that needs to be taken serious. It's not grandiose. It's the mind that tries to make things bigger than they actually are. We're like the custodians of the planet. In reality, a human being is nothing more than a custodian to this world. The environment and nature created a being that is essentially capable of picking up the pieces of the mess and taking those pieces and building something beautiful out of them. We've just utilized that capacity to its maximum apex for our own intentions. And from that, there really needs to be a lesson learned that we've hyperextended the species towards a machination that is not really beneficial or fruitful, an endeavor that leads nowhere but the maintaining of such a system that causes so much intrinsic suffering, so much intrinsic doom and gloom about existing. And that's the sad thing, is life doesn't have to be intrinsically complex. In fact, life without the complexity of modernity is incredibly simple. So simple to the degree that I think anyone or anything living on the planet would find it fundamentally beginner level at this stage. Life without modernity is like living in level 1. And that's the ironic thing about modernity, is it itself is kind of a simulation of other people's ideas for a given circumstance that is basically fighting against nature. It's when you flow with nature and you become adaptable that you realize how simple and how easy